I'm looking at the London Guardian headline right now. British woman arrested, imprisoned for asking cop for badge number. Shows him choking her and beating her. And the police are saying that's the new policy. You ask us a question, we beat you. We'll talk to Dr. Roberts about that. His new book covers it. The issue here is we've seen this in society over and over again. The reason I bring it up as we get into Iran is I don't support the mullahs. I know governments tend to get corrupt and evil and bad. The point is that our government has overthrown them in 53 for people that don't know, and Dr. Roberts can speak to that. The issue is they're in there fomenting this revolution. This guy's got connections to the CIA and MI6. We've clearly got color revolutions in there for people that don't know. And if the globalists, the people running our country, are able to bring down Iran, that's going to embolden them to attack more nations. So that's my point here. And Dr. Roberts, I saw him 3-4 days ago write editorials, and he'd show photos pointing out why are these Iranians wearing green for the opposition candidate, holding up signs that are in English. They look westernized, and he went back through some of the history. It's now come out. They are staging rallies. They are staging photos. They got caught. The BBC, as I just said, had to retract. They were showing photos of people that were really supporters of Ahmadinejad and then cropping the photos to deceive people. So there's all sorts of chicanery. In fact, I'm not defending the security forces there, but if you watch those videos on YouTube carefully, there are people firing at the police, attacking their positions, burning cars, and the police are firing back. So all I'm saying is there's deception going on, and I've seen Fox News saying and CNN, oh, we ought to help the Iranians. We ought to give them support. We ought to try to overthrow them. That's deception, folks. The White House admits, and the last White House admits, they're in there manipulating this. They are in there pushing this. So why don't they just be honest? Dr. Roberts.
Well, let me just give some facts. This is not anything to do with my opinion. We've known since May of 2007 from ABC News, from the London Telegraph, from Seymour Hersh and the New Yorker, that that President Bush had signed an authorization for a black ops group to destabilize the Iranian government and to topple it. So they've had that for 2 years, and they've had an open-ended budget. We also know there are press reports that we have been funding not merely politically distant groups, but also terrorist groups, MEK, MEK, for example, groups on the that are or were before we began supporting them on the State Department's list of terrorist organizations. And we know recently there have been bombings and assassinations in Iran carried out by these terrorist groups that we fund. So we know that there is this operation going. It's been going for 2 years. We also know, for example, that the National Endowment for Democracy funds dissident groups in countries that we want to control, where we want to orchestrate a revolution, a color revolution. And recently, the arch neoconservative Kenneth Timmerman, who has an organization It's called Foundation for Democracy. It's funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, and the purpose of Timmerman's organization is to promote democracy in Iran. Now, here's what he wrote prior to the election. He wrote, this is before anybody has voted in Iran, there's talk of a green revolution in Tehran. Well, now, how would he know that? Unless it was orchestrated plan. Why would there be a green revolution prepared prior to the vote, especially if Mousavi and his supporters were as confident of victory as they claim? In other words, this was all set up in advance. And Timmerman goes on to say that the National Endowment for Democracy, these are direct quotes, has spent millions of dollars promoting color revolutions. Some of that money appears to have made it into the hands of pro-Musavi groups who have ties to non-governmental organizations outside Iran that the National Endowment for Democracy funds. So there we have it. It's no doubt that we're funding these people, including terrorists.
Absolutely, Doctor. And that's why your articles that we have links to up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com and up on Counterpunch.org and others are so important. But I'd like you to go back before you continue, and we've got one more segment with you after the news, and we appreciate the time. And it's this. On record, Cy Hirsch actually in 2004 wrote that U.S. forces were in there staging terror attacks. Special forces were on the ground, that they had 4 groups, 1 Kurdish, 3 connected to Saudi Arabia, the Sunnis, including the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. This is mainstream news, blowing up mosques, bombing police stations. The Iranians have been suing the U.S. at the UN, saying that our government's staging this. And then the White House, as you mentioned, in 2007 puts out a press release bragging they're doing it. And then I'm watching people last night on Fox News. I'm going to play a clip up next segment. Lieutenant Colonel Bill Cohen bragging about how they need to torture people and invade Iran. Then he goes on Fox to run black ops on the American people and says, I'm angry at Obama. He's not supporting the overthrow in these great freedom fighters, knowing the whole thing's run by Bush and now still Obama. Cynical black ops behaving as if this whole thing isn't staged, while Al-Qaeda is attacking Iran when we're losing all our freedoms because of Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, well, you've got it figured out. And I think there's so many dead giveaways. For example, Musavi declared his victory several hours before the polls closed.
Ah, yes, I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, see, this is classic CIA destabilization because it discredits a contrary outcome, and it forces an early declaration of the vote, because the longer the time interval between the preemptive declaration of victory and the release of the vote tally, the longer Musavi and the CIA have to create the impression that the authorities are using the time to fix the vote. And it's just amazing to me people don't see through this trick.
Well, that's really a key point. And when I saw your article yesterday, I went and looked that up, and it's even in Iranian press TV and BBC, you're right. Hours and hours before it was even completed, he was already declaring victory and saying he'd won by this giant margin. Yeah. How could he know to put out the false idea that then when he lost, it was a cheat? Yeah,
that's the way you work it. And there's some other telltale things. For example,
well, it's based on a color. That's what George Soros always does. It's mindless.
Alex, let me get.
Sorry, go ahead.
The point made. According to the Iranian experts that we have, there's no real difference between Musavi and Ahmadinejad. And the notion this guy is a moderate is absurd because, look, first of all, there's no history of large-scale election fraud in the Iranian presidential races. If the mullahs don't like a candidate, they just kick him off the ballot. So if they were worried about Musavi winning and didn't want him to win, they just wouldn't have put him on the ballot. Who gets on the ballot is up to the that council, that small council of mullahs, to choose. And so obviously they didn't have any objections to him. And when Khatami, a liberal reformer, ran for president, the entire conservative establishment absolutely hated him. But they did nothing about it. He won both of his races. And if they don't cheat against a liberal outsider like Khatami, how in the world would they cheat against a pillar of the establishment like Musavi? So the whole thing is, I think, that Musavi got disgruntled. The CIA knows how to manipulate disgruntled people. And they're using him to discredit the Iranian government. I don't think they'll be able to topple it because it seems to be mainly westernized youth in Tehran making these protests. But whether they topple or not, they've won because they will have discredited the Iranian government. The Ayatollahs thought this election would increase the foreign legitimacy of the regime. Instead, it's decreased it. So now Obama has a reason to say, well, we were going to do diplomacy, but it's failed. Look, they're crooks. They steal elections. And there's nothing left but sanctions and the military option. And John Bolton told, according to the London Telegraph, who printed this.
Hold on, got a break. We'll come back after the news. I got to interrupt you, and we'll get to this. Incredible info from Dr. Paul Craig Roberts laying out every piece of information. This is completely staged, folks.